Black Myth Wukong, more controversy surrounding this game. Why? Because it doesn't have the DEI social justice propaganda in it that games journalists require for every game these days. And if it doesn't line up with their narrative, they cry and they make fake controversies up all the time. And that's what's been happening with this game. But we do have an interesting discussion about the do's and the don'ts surrounding review copies that were sent out surrounding this game. And we're going to react to an RGT85 video. I've said many times I'm a fan of RGT85. He still doesn't follow me back on Twitter. I think now he's just doing it to spite me. I've moved on. I've gotten over it, RGT. No big deal. The wounds have healed, and we're going to watch his video on it. So the Black Myth Wukong situation just got really weird. Let's listen to what he's got to say. Future Jeremy here, and in the editing process, I realized that RGT's audio is out of sync in my OBS, and I was going to fix it, but you know what? He doesn't follow me back on Twitter, so it's his own fault. Enjoy the video.
This is honestly one of the strangest stories that I think I've seen in quite a while, and I'm not even necessarily sure that I'm going to have like a definitive opinion on this. I almost want to put this out there with like just a few ideas and see how people react. We're talking about Black Myth Wukong once again, which I talked about the game yesterday on the channel.
And the game is getting pretty good reviews across the board, but there is some negativity out there. Screen Rant specifically gave it a bad review, or gave it some of the cons were that it didn't have enough diversity. Not even making that up. That's what Screen Rant's negativity was not enough diversity.
Did talk about some of the controversies surrounding the studio and some of the accusations that have been made about them, all sorts of stuff. But I was more interested in where are the PS5 review copies. This game comes out in a matter of a couple of days now, and obviously to not see any PlayStation 5 footage, but to have PC only footage and all the review copies be PC only review copies is kind of strange.
It's a valid question.
You know, now it does seem like there's some footage that has emerged from this game that is the PlayStation 5 build. From the brief time that was shown within this footage, everything looked fine, but I still think that there's a lot of questions to be answered that will be answered very soon. But like I said, that was about the game. This is about kind of like the review process of the game and things that you can and can't talk about. And this is very, very muddy waters.
I don't get review copies of games, shockingly enough. I'm certainly too toxic to get those. I've been offered a couple in the past. Nothing from any. I guess there's been a couple of decent ones, but I'm not really interested in that stuff. I don't really want these game companies to offer me anything because fuck them, all of them, except for Nintendo. Nintendo, holler at your boy, okay? Holler at your boy, Nintendo. But in all reality, I don't want any of the review copies. I just want them to make good games and make fun games, and I'll buy the game myself so I can have fun with it, but I don't need them to give me review copies.
So let's just look at this together. So Jordan Midler from Video Games Chronicle put out a tweet, I should say, not necessarily a thing, talking about Black Myth Wukong things and things that you were allowed and not allowed to talk about within the review. So PSA, before people go mental about this review doc, at least in the UK, included absolutely nothing like this. It's pretty standard, if a bit strict, list of in-game content we can't mention. No journalist would agree to an embargo with an anti-feminism clause. JFC, especially not in 2024.
Hey, throw me some anti-feminism clauses all day long. Sign me up right there. Jordan Midler. I can go ahead and tell. I know nothing about Jordan Midler. I can go ahead and tell you, though, on that last line, JFC, how can we be so mean about feminism? I can already tell that Jordan Midler, definitely a soy boy. Definitely.
But basically, there was this post that was made on Gaming Leaks and Rumors Reddit saying that Black Myth Wukong keys were sent to journalists with a request not to mention certain topics, such as feminism or opinions about China. Now, though the document was available online, it has been since removed, but you couldn't talk about quarantine, isolation, COVID-19. And okay, so let's talk about this in and of itself. So Jordan is saying that this was not applicable to them. I say that because as we go along, the story kind of changes. But when you get a review copy of a game, there are different types of review copies. Once again, kind of lifting the veil of content creation and stuff like that. Speaking as a content creator, because here's where this gets murky as we go along as well, but I also have worked on the other side of video game stuff with the journalism side of things when I was a writer for Nintendo Enthusiast and editor-in-chief. So when you get a review copy, sometimes you get information with that where it's like, okay, you could talk about the game up until this point. Don't talk about this boss battle, etc., etc. It's usually based on stuff that is pertinent to the game itself.
I mean, that makes sense, obviously. I think what this does, like this whole like don't push feminist propaganda, don't talk about COVID, don't talk about this. I feel like that's representative of games journalists. Games journalists have to push all of this bullshit into every review, even if it doesn't apply to the game itself. Games journalists have been completely compromised across the board. And I feel like that's what this is all about. This just gives you a perspective as to how far games journalist has fallen. I've mentioned this recently. I grew up reading EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Game Informer, Nintendo Power. At no point in time was there ever anything in there that wasn't directly related to video games and giving you good information about the video game or the upcoming system. We're giving you a review based on the game, based on the experience in the game. Games journalists in the last 10, 15 years, whatever it's been now, they have completely been hijacked by social justice freaks that only care about real world politics and how they can take a game that has nothing to do with the real world and intertwine their left-wing bullshit propaganda into it. So that's what the do's and the don'ts represent from my perspective on this. It's games journalists and how hijacked they have made the industry.
Story of the game, stuff like that. This isn't like a sponsored video in which if it's a sponsored video, you do usually have to send it in to the company so that they can approve it. And then, yes, you'll get things like, hey, don't talk about a war that's going on or something like that. You know, basic things.
This is why I don't get sponsors. I mean, I know we have some for the live streams and stuff like that. I don't do video sponsors, but this is why this is why I'm so thankful to work with the few sponsors that we've had up to this point. I don't have to deal with any, and I'm not going to deal with any of that bullshit. If somebody tells me like you can't talk about, fuck off. I don't need your money. Don't want your money. If you're going to dictate what I can and can't talk about, then you're in the wrong place to begin with. So I'm really thankful when we have sponsors that don't give us parameters to work in, because the moment any sponsor wants to give me parameters about like don't talk about this, then we're done.
Do make sense, but once again, that is a sponsored video because that is indicative of, you know, what you are doing and signing an agreement with a company. Most of the time, you don't sign an agreement of things when you're talking about a video game review in and of itself. It just comes down to the stuff that you're allowed to talk about in terms of story, in
all
terms
that makes sense.
of, you know, surprises that are in the game. It's all based on the game itself. So it seems like
and that would be very, very understandable. Hey, here's a review copy. You're going to get it early. You can't talk about anything beyond this point in the game because we want to make sure that the audience gets the surprise or whatever. All of that makes 100% sense right there. I get that.
That are in the game. It's all based on the game itself. So it seems like this was a whole fake situation. Or was it? Or was it? Because after Paul Tassi of Forbes, which, I mean, I did see Paul make some questionable tweets about me during my
Paul
little fun
Tassi
time with IGN France and the whole Stellar Blade situation. Hi, Paul Tassi. How you doing, buddy? Hope you're doing well. Paul says, okay, I'm actually surprised here, but I have confirmed with a U.S. creator I trust that the Black Myth Wukong guideline email is real. An extended conversation with an email tracing back to the company resulted in an actual code for the game. It's not some random Google Doc. So these were the do's and don'ts of your guideline that you get of things that you can and can't do, even though you don't have to submit this to the company. So really the only way that the company will ever know is if they watch the video. Do's: enjoy the game. Don'ts: do not insult other influencers or players. Do not use any offensive language or humor. That's weird, because who's decided as offensive? You know, I could be considered very offensive, but then there's some people who don't consider me offensive. Do not include politics, violence, nudity, feminist propaganda, fetishization, and other content that instigates negative discourse.
Yeah.
Okay. Do not use trigger words such as quarantine.
This is 100% directed at typical games journalists. That's what this is designed for. Games journalists go after YouTubers. They go after fans and after players. The whole offensive language, humor, I'm not really, I don't know what that means. Do not include politics, violence, nudity, feminist propaganda. Oh, you had me at hello. You had me at feminist propaganda, not to include that. That is fantastic. Day one purchase right here for me. But yeah, don't use trigger words like quarantine, isolation, COVID-19. Do not discuss content related to China's game industry policies, opinions. Again, I feel like this is 1,000% directly targeting current games journalists and the things that they typically do all the time. They talk about everything but the fucking video game.
Or COVID-19. Do not discuss any content related to China's game industry policies, opinions, news, or etc.
And by the way, I'm not saying that I agree with this, by the way. If you sent me this document, like, I know I'm getting funny with the whole, like, oh, feminist propaganda, because absolutely, like, shut down that bullshit. But there's not a chance in hell I'm signing something like this or agreeing to something like this in general. I'm not. I think this is nonsense in general. But what I'm saying is specifically, if I'm looking at this, it seems like it's directed at what we've come to know from the current games journalist industry and what they are all about. That's my whole point behind this. But I would never agree to this, except for the feminist propaganda. Do not include that shit.
Video games in 2024, folks. Okay. So this, like I said, I'm not even sure that I'm going to have like a definitive opinion on this, but this is very weird.
Not really.
Now,
not really.
First and foremost, because I'm not under any of these embargoes, I can talk about whatever the hell I want. Something like bringing up China, because
it's a Chinese game. Yeah, it's a Chinese game studio.
I do want to look at it from a perspective of China is a different place than the United States. Now, before I even get into that, let me just say that this was a content creator, so maybe they have some sort of thing where it's like journalists and content creators had separate sorts of do's and don'ts of what they
ultimately,
could talk about.
It's because games journalists can't stop talking about things that have nothing to do with the fucking video game. That's what I think. Who cares? Like, when you have a video game that has been released and you're getting a review copy, your job is to review the video game for what the video game is providing, not any outside stuff. That's the entire point behind it, is for all of these social justice activists to shut the fuck up. That's the point behind it. Again, I would never agree to this shit, but I understand what it's all about.
I'll just leave that out there. That's up to you whether to think that's something that's viable or not, or something that's realistic or not. But this kind of goes back kind of to the Stellar Blade situation, where, you know, like that Rammstein song says, we're all living in America, America, this wonderbar. Like, you do have to realize, because gaming journalism, I mean, gaming creation is hitting many countries that we haven't really seen a lot of gaming creators come out of, a lot of bigger budget titles and stuff like that. They're getting into this piece of the pie. And a lot of these countries have very, very different views of things than, you know, your traditional Western companies or even some Japanese companies. Like, it's very different. If you go to China, it is very different than your town in the United States
Yes.
or your town in Canada or wherever you are. Even if you are in a different place that's not, an American country. Like if you go from Africa to China, from South America to China, no matter where you are, it's going to be different. And so because of that, because China has very strict things, maybe this is something that is indeed true. It is a learning process. They have a different culture. They have different things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and all of that sort of stuff. It's kind of like, what we saw with Korea, what's socially acceptable. Socially acceptable.
I don't think it's that complicated. I seriously think that it's representative of games journalists and how they can't shut the fuck up about everything that has nothing to do, everything but the video game. That's the standard that these idiots have set for themselves, is they talk about everything but the video game. And this do's and don'ts list, from my perspective, and I haven't heard any clarification. I'm just looking at it for what it is, and that's what it seems like to me. It's like, how about just review the game? How about that?
Both things vary greatly from country to country because it's all based on their own thing. So on one hand, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can understand it. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, shouldn't there be someone to be like, okay, do you want to read a review that talks about politics and stuff like that and randomly mentions Kamala and Hulk Hogan and Donald Trump, and then the other Kamala, R.I.P. to the Ugandan.
He said Kamala because he's a wrestling fan. I know exactly what he did.
Giant, no. Most people don't want to see that sort of stuff because, it's pointless. But violence, there's violence in the game. Feminist propaganda. Why would I talk about
That's the point, RGT.
In the game? What is offensive?
Why did they ever talk about this shit? Because they can't stop. That's the point.
Words. What? Trigger words? What are trigger words? This is all very open to interpretation. And the fact that this is kind of video games in 2024, I don't know, man. This seems really weird.
I don't think it's that weird. I think that the don't use offensive language or humor part, that one line, you're kind of like, I don't understand. I don't know what they meant by that. But everything else, I think that it's just representative of games journalists. I think that's it. I think that's all this is. And to be fair, that's exactly it needs to be said to all these fucking idiots in games journalism, because they're idiots, all of them. They don't care about video games. They don't care about video game culture. They don't care about the video game industry. All they care is bringing their personal political opinion into everything. They can't stop themselves.
And I don't know what my opinion on it is, because you want to respect other countries' beliefs. You don't have to agree with them. Not saying that, but you do have to understand that you don't live there. This is not your sort of thing. You can hope that things get better. You can, I guess, protest to hope that
you're overthinking it.
Kind of like with the little marching sign. You can hope and protest that things get better in these countries and that things change to what you view is to be a positive thing. But at the same time, it's probably not going to do jack shit. So you're just wasting your time. But on the other hand, it's like, when you leave China, when you go to a global audience, the global audience, once again, they don't live in China. They don't have your same sort of restrictions. So I don't know. I think
you should be able to understand exactly what this is. That's what I think. That's where I think this all lands. I think I'm right about it. I think that this is geared directly towards these idiots and trying to shut them up about running their mouths about things that have nothing to do with the video game.
So this is where I throw it to you, because I don't know. I don't know what to think about this. It's so strange. It's just another sort of cog in the wheel of this, you know, this whole Black Myth Wukong situation. Do's and don'ts, cans and can'ts. Where are the game codes? Like, at the end of the day, really, I just care if the game is good or not.
But the reason all of this controversy is happening around this game is because it doesn't have the diversity that is needed from games journalists. That's why the controversy has happened. That's all it's ever about, because these idiots create all of this stuff out of nothing, because they have to create some type of narrative around racism or sexism or something like that every single time. And especially if the fans are actually looking forward to it, then they certainly have to destroy it with their narrative. So that's my stance on it. Like I said, I wouldn't sign that shit, but I understand where it's coming from, and it's directed at games journalists and how retarded they are. And from that perspective, I'm 100% in favor of it, because it's already upsetting so many of them. And yeah, just like the guy that RGT pulled his tweet up, and he's like, no journalist would ever sign off on anything with anti-feminism. I would. I'm not a journalist, though. I'm just a retard with an internet connection. And but we'll see. But are you looking forward to Black Myth Wukong? What do you think about all of this? Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think? Do you think that's directed at games journalism? Do you think it's an overreach? Should they just not say that at all? Is it too much? Yada, yada, yada. Let me know. You guys have a great day. Thank you very much for checking out this video. I'll leave a link to RGT85's YouTube channel. I do like RGT. He makes really good content. I watch him all the time. And if you're into gaming content, he makes really good gaming content. So have a great day, and we will talk to all of you later.